Hey everybody out there in YouTube, this is Slats McGillicuddy here with GunWebsites.com, and we are here with the man, the myth, the legend, Dennis Tueller. I just wanted to ask you a quick question, Mr. Tueller. We're all familiar with the Tueller Drill and the quote-unquote 21-foot rule. How did that come about? How did you develop that concept?
Okay. It was actually in response to a student's question.
Okay.
I was doing firearms training for Salt Lake PD at the time. This would have been early 1980s. And during a firearms training class, a student asked about use of deadly force against someone armed with a contact weapon, a knife or a club. And the question was, at what point has this person gotten close enough that I am justified in using deadly force to stop them? And after some brief discussion, I realized that I didn't have a good answer to that question. So we decided to find out how quickly someone could attack from 7 yards. And the question is, why 7 yards? Because we've been drawing and shooting at 7 yards. We had a baseline. We knew about how long it should take us to draw and hit a target at 7 yards. So we had a student play the role of a bad guy, and another student play the role of the officer, caught deer in the headlights, and a couple of us with stopwatches. When the bad guy attacked, we started the watch. When they made contact, we stopped the watch, and we discovered that it was a lot faster than we had thought. I thought, somebody's 7 yards away, and I got a gun, and he's got a knife. Yeah, well, we found out that the best you could hope for is a tie. And
Which
that's when
really isn't a tie.
It isn't, and that's when you're expecting it. So we did some more experimenting, and we tried. We had several different. We had a class of a couple of dozen new recruit officers, and younger and older, and male and female, and we tried it with several different people, and we discovered it was pretty consistent. Most people could run that 7 yard distance in about the same time most people could draw and fire. And then we realized too that boy, if you factor in multiple adversaries, then more distance might be required. That if you see the threat in time, you should draw your pistol and cover and issue a verbal challenge. You should use cover. You should use obstacles. Now, when contact weapons require contact distance, so you may not need to be hiding behind a brick wall. But if you can keep tables and chairs and trash cans between you and the guy coming at you, anything that slows him down and buys you time to react and respond. And I was also training at Gunsight as a part-timer back then, and one of the guys I was working with there was Chuck Taylor, who was the operations officer at the time. I'm sure many of the folks hearing this are familiar with Chuck Taylor. Chuck was the editor of SWAT magazine at the time, and when I was telling him about this study we'd been doing in Salt Lake, he said that would make an excellent article, and so I wrote up an article that appeared in the March 1983 issue of SWAT magazine. The title was, "How Close is Too Close?" And that led to this discussion we've now had about how we train people to respond to this. Masad Ayub, again, is another familiar name in this industry. He contacted me about that. He wrote another article, and we've since corresponded and trained together. He elaborated on that in some follow-up articles. He started doing a training exercise, and he's the one that attached my name to it. He talks about the Tueller principle as regarding reaction response time, and he dubbed it the Tueller Drill. And I appreciate him, giving me the credit there. So, now you mentioned the term 21-foot rule. Can I just elaborate on that for a minute?
Absolutely.
I'm not quite sure where that crept in there, and it's probably because we used 21 feet in that original article.
That original 3 yard or 7 yards.
Yeah, but there's nothing magic about 21 feet. We used that because we had a baseline for how long it takes to draw and shoot. The reactionary gap, which is the term Caliber Press uses in their surviving age weapons training tape.
Okay.
They talk about a reactionary gap, and that varies depending on your physical ability, how long it takes you to draw, the proximity of they use the term proxemics also, talking about how close the threat is. With multiple adversaries, you might need to engage several people with several rounds to get them stopped, and that can require much greater distance than just 21 feet. There's nothing magic about 21 feet. It's reaction and response time. So I want to make sure that...
Which could vary wildly.
Oh, absolutely. How are you carrying your gun? Find out how long it takes you to draw your pistol from however you are carrying it. Because if it's less than 2 seconds, then somewhere around 20 to 25 feet is a pretty good reactionary gap. But if you're a deep concealment kind of person and it takes you several seconds to clear the clothing or dig in the purse or whatever it is, all that adds time to your response And that means somebody at 40 or 50 or 60 feet can be on top of you in the time it takes you to dig everything out. So it has a lot to do with your own skill and ability and what you know about how long it takes you to respond. At extremely close range, if we're at conversation distance, if you suddenly produce a weapon, probably the best thing I can do is see if I can block or disarm you, rather than, because you've already started. And I cannot beat you to the draw at that point. So there are other options to factor in depending on the proximity. But that's kind of where that whole thing all came from, and it's apparently done some people some good.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Mr. Tueller. I have another question.
Sure.
We're up here in obviously not so sunny Cottonwood, Arizona, and we're studying the Glock Armorers course, which was awesome, by the way, and I highly recommend that everybody go through it. How did you get tied in with Glock? I know that you did a whole lot of time with the police department up in Utah. And, how did you end up here?
Okay, let's see, quick chronology. Sometimes I wonder, I'm not entirely sure how this all, the stars all align. This is a good job for me. Glock's a good company to work for, and it's a solid product. Salt Lake City PD was there for 25 years. I was helping run the firearms training back in the 1980s when Glock first hit the market. Now, I had also been training with Jeff Cooper at Gunsight. I was in one of the original classes there and was one of his part-time instructors. And so learned about semi-auto pistols and the modern technique, and was trying to incorporate that for Salt Lake PD. Glock was one of the pistols we started evaluating, along with other semi-auto pistols that a lot of law enforcement agencies in the U.S. were adopting back in the 80s. And I slowly but surely gained an appreciation of what we called tactical Tupperware, because it worked so well, because it was so simple to maintain. I researched what the Austrian military trials had involved and became very impressed with how rugged the gun was. And we got some for testing, and we almost couldn't ever make anything go wrong with them. And so we at Salt Lake adopted Glock as one of our options, and then later selected it as the general issue firearm. After I retired from the Salt Lake PD, I've worked in the firearms industry. Action Target, one of the world's largest target equipment companies in Provo, Utah, good friends of ours. Worked for them for a time doing training using their target equipment. I was working at the U.S. Department of Energy in Albuquerque, New Mexico at their National Training Center. I was the operations officer there at their firearms training range, where I became acquainted with a guy who was doing some work for Glock and found out that they were looking for a trainer to do this job in the Western region. And the timing all seemed to align, and that was almost 6 years ago.
Very cool.
So I'm now, we moved from Albuquerque back to the Salt Lake area, which is home base for me, and I get to do all this fun Glock stuff throughout the western U.S., and that's a good gig. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, we're very fortunate to have you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Pleasure to have you guys here, and thanks for taking a few minutes to clarify some of this historical stuff.
No, thank you. So, there you have it from gunwebsites.com, and the man, the myth, the legend, Dennis Tueller.
The guys and gals of gunwebsites.com encourage you to take a CCW class every year, practice at least once a month, and carry every day. Thanks for watching gunwebsites.com.